Housing, or rather the lack of it, has been one of the top subjects and issues facing Vermont for several years now. A lack of a good range of housing for low and middle income Vermonters, and those who would like to be, has been highlighted well before the arrival of the COVID pandemic in 2020, which boosted the issue even further. Real estate values soared, housing inventory became scarce, and rental apartments that were affordable became very hard to find. Recently, Governor Phil Scott and Treasury Secretary Mike Pieciak announced a new program that would inject about $55 million into building more housing across Vermont. The 10% in Vermont program allows the Treasurer's office to invest up to 10% of the state's cash deposits for economic development and job creation in the form of low-interest loans, according to the state Treasurer's office. So we thought we'd take a look at how the housing crunch is playing out in some of our local communities, and we began in Arlington, where we sat down with Town Administrator Nick Zayas to discuss what the town is doing to try to encourage more housing development.
The shortage is crisis level, and that word gets thrown around a lot. But ultimately, the if you compare what Arlington is today and the population that it has versus the population projections that are in the town plans and the regional plans looking back over the decades, the story here is that for for the entirety of urban planning in Vermont, Arlington was expected to be a town of 3,000 or 3,500 or maybe 4,000 people by this point. That translates into a number of the number of housing units in the hundreds, not simply in the infill couple or dozens. It is a story of they of a shortage up to something like 25% of the total housing stock of the country. And in any case, the crisis is acute in a way that families feel. That you hear stories of single individuals who have moved to town looking to are have a job in the area or looking to set up business, and they can't find a home. You have people who are the children of local families. They cannot find a home that of any sort in the area, let alone one that doesn't jump you into a giant DIY job or is functionally a teardown. This is something that the town needs to take seriously, and the town has been taking seriously. It is we are working on this from all fronts because we hear it from citizens every day. There are other issues, but ultimately housing typically will be able to fix many of them. More housing means more grand list. More grand list means more services, and particularly if that housing is in the areas of the town that are already developed, they're cheap to serve. And that means that the amount of public services that they consume is less than if they were on the outside fringes of town where getting firefighters out there takes forever. So because these pieces all work together, I see a crisis to the tune of 25% of the total housing stock.
So, to what do you attribute that shortage, or what are the reasons why there's a shortfall to that extent? Is it a zoning question that, one hears all kinds of rational reasons, cost of labor, cost of construction materials, permitting issues. Is there anything unique in Arlington beyond some of those factors that seem to be the case in many other communities, or is it basically those and the usual list of factors that we hear about?
Yeah, in Arlington, it's three factors. There was a zoning constraint that is still being addressed. There is a water constraint. The town was losing a lot of water for generations before it acquired the water company. There are still constraints on that water system that are going to require ARPA spending to get addressed and get the town back on a path to growth with regard to the water system. And then there's work on wastewater, where a town can only support as many people as it can dispose of the wastewater associated with. And we have a wastewater committee and a study ongoing on that. So those are the three constraints. You have zoning that sets the jello mold of what can be built. You have water that limits how much that's coming in from a constraint of the natural environment of how much water is in that beautiful well in Sunderland that we have. And then the third is a geographic constraint. It's a pure land issue. Is there enough of the right type of land onto which we can put giant septic fields that can support the housing in these town centers? And there may be other factors. There may be a bit broader cost of labor and things like that, and addressing the education system. But if in a world where it's the housing theory of everything, you have three major factors that are going to be your constraints in more or less any town, but particularly in Arlington.
You mentioned zoning there. I mean, I guess I wondered, are there any incentives underway right now to try and sort of fix that? And I guess, but before we get to that, I guess I just wonder, do you foresee the shortfall in housing being addressed more in like sort of the downtown of Arlington with multi-family units like the one on Center Street there, or the one off of the main road, or is it going to be more kind of on the outskirts of the town, so to speak?
It's going to be Arlington relies on a village zone that broadly covers the center of town. It broadly is in line with the water system. And I think that's one really good way to set up your zoning, to be associated with where there is the infrastructure to serve that density of zoning. So knowing our town has a fairly limited water system compared to a town like Manchester that pumps many times more gallons every day. Our water system only has capacity in certain areas, so it shows where that work can be done. But importantly, that village zone is a pretty large area. It covers all of central Arlington, all of East Arlington, and including out to almost the first bridge to River Road in near West Arlington. And all of these areas are areas that could sustain some growth, and a lot of that is really small scale. It's the addition of accessory dwelling units and conversion of people's garages. It could be in some of these areas, particularly in East Arlington, we have some dilapidated buildings that are no longer occupied. When they fall down eventually, they'll be great building lots for someone who has access to water and potentially has access to wastewater in the long run. So we could see some small multifamily buildings like exist all through the center of town on some of these other lots, moving from 0 people on that property to maybe 7 people on that property, and 4 units in the kind of 2/2 simple archetype that has existed in Vermont towns forever. And then we could see some development on the outlying areas. There are density bonuses here that have been brought in state law that will incentivize some development on the outlying areas that have the water and sewerage capacity on their own to stand alone. Vermont relies on a lot of those communities, and each one of those can mean a substantial amount of units, even if it's not high in absolute terms. A couple of units can make a really big difference to a family that is trying to find a place to live just to stay somewhere near people where they have a support network. It doesn't have to be someone's forever home. It needs to be a place that someone can live to stay near where the people that they love, and or stay near a job that motivates them and that brings that value to the economy that we need.
As part of that effort, Arlington's Planning Board recently completed its work on some new zoning regulations, which were approved by the Arlington Select Board on September 11th. Town Administrator Zayas discussed what was part of that update.
So the Arlington Planning Commission has been with support of a grant from the state and the Bennington County Regional Commission, have undertaken the complete rewriting of the zoning bylaw, going back to basics, reformatting it, reorganizing it, and making it into a document that any citizen can open up, read, find exactly what they need with a really good table of contents, with diagrams, and with with an understanding that you know that you'll be able to find everything that's associated with what your dream might be. It is here to support people who want to bring housing to Arlington. It's here to support the businesses of Arlington that'll have a lot more certainty in what they can and can't do on their property, and when and how they may need to ask permission to start something up. It brings clarity to home-based businesses and when they may or may not need permits, and it brings some limited but strategic housing and density improvements that will allow for increased housing opportunities in the town without destroying the rural character that Arlington is known for, that Rockwellian wonderfulness that is the rural zone. And so it focuses on some new housing capacity into the town centers, creates some incentives to make sure that people want to build, and that the rules are adaptable and comprehensive in a way that people should expect out of a well-written zoning law.
Resolving the state's housing shortage will be a complicated and expensive effort. We'll be taking more looks at how other communities in our area are dealing with their shortages of housing and the solutions that might be found. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.